Welcome back to this Art for Change session. I hope that everybody is seeing me correctly. Now for our next session, which is a fireside chat between world-class French artist Xavier Veilhan and Sylvie Bétard, the founder of Les Augures. We were very fortunate to record that interview a few days ago. So you're going to see, we will talk about how can an artist still create without destroying everything or anything, how the philosophical dimension of belonging to a whole and to an environment and to creation, and finally very practical steps that any artist can undertake at the studio level, at the exhibition level, and moreover at the global level. So please, à la régie, roll the clip. So Xavier Veilhan, thank you very much, and thank you to the whole team for welcoming us to your studio.
My pleasure.
Welcome to everyone online. Thank you very much for your participation to ChangeNOW. So we are here to talk about what do artists embody for society, what do they represent, and how do they act concretely. So Xavier, you're one of the most internationally acclaimed French artists. Your work sits in the most prestigious museums in the world, but also in public space. Here in Paris, you are both inside Pompidou and outside Pompidou. And inside with a beautiful red rhino, and outside with the silhouettes of Pompidou architects, Piano and Rogers. And your latest works was in Stockholm last year. I'm thinking of the two Valberg giants, one which is 19 meters long, a very peacefully reclining figure of a man, and among all the different techniques of your broad practice, you also draw, you paint, you don't only do sculpture, but these monumental pieces, the very large ones that are traveling around the world, ask very relevant questions in terms of art and ecology. So that's the questions that you asked yourself, and that also you asked Sylvie Bétard a few months ago. So Sylvie, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
You are an entrepreneur. You founded a brand of paper. You also created La Réserve des Arts more than 10 years ago. A priceless mine of upcycled material for artists, for designers, for creators. So you have been working with waste for many years. And when I say waste, I mean resources. And today you are the director of the Upcyclery and also the co-founder of Les Augures, to advise artists and institutions on how to reduce their environmental impact and much more. So my first question will go to you, Xavier. This conversation that we're having now could not have happened if you, Xavier, had not thought about your own impact and the impact of your work. So you are not what we call an artiviste, your work does not necessarily talk about ecology, yet you wondered and you asked yourself some questions. What was for you the trigger, and where does this questioning come from?
I think one of the trigger was to realize at some point that before artistic reason, before economical reason, was the environmental reason to put on top of the pyramid of problem of questions. And I think it's a special point of view that I developed because being within the art world, because the relation to time is very different. It's a work of the instant and the moment and the contemporaneity, but at the same time it's a relation to time in a long term. And it reminds me, for example, the political issues about environmental questions, because you can't deal on a short term with those issues. And also I have access to a lot of great things, luxury hotel, travel in good conditions, and part of my work was not was kind of hidden to myself. For example, if I'm doing a show abroad, or like right now I have a show in Japan, for example, how can I estimate and what is the benchmark to the consumption of energy that it involves, and is it worth doing it? And I realized at some point that I couldn't even formulate this question myself. So I heard about the work of les Augures, and their approach was very hand-on and practical. And for example, not ideological, but more oriented on the result, which I thought was worth starting this new direction. But I have to say it's a long-term process, and as we discussed, from scratch, it's not something you can solve completely. So what you have to achieve is to go to a better efficiency, but which can be 80% better, but you will never reach 100%.
I mean, you have sculptures in resin, in aluminum, in stainless steel. You use a coating and painting, but you, for the medium, for the materiality, what are you looking for in a material? Are you looking for aesthetic properties, the stories that are behind the material, or you can tell through the material, the provenance of the material, the physical resistance to outdoor conditions, because you do a lot of public art? What are you looking for?
So the efficiency is the first criteria, but the efficiency is very different if you an approach on the art which is more conceptual or philosophical, and also on the other hand you have the permanency of the material. There is a kind of a paradox with art, is that when you study art history, for example, you can see that the art is developing itself in certain periods, and then will disappear, like Renaissance, and but we have little work in quantities compared to what was produced during the Renaissance. So just to say that the idea of permanency of art is always associated. So when I'm producing something, people consider, because it's art, that it will last forever, which is not. So my situation is to combine and to make something which is a kind of a compromise between what I want to express and the mean I have, and the money I have, and the time I have, and how to lead to a certain impact and a certain sustainability, which is always the kind of a compromise. And the problem is that when you start with an idea, which is starting point from art is an idea, you consume very little energy with this idea, and when you try to develop it and make it fit in the real environment, which is the aim of art for me. Good art is an idea that is like a puzzle shape fitting into the reality. Then you start to consume and to So this leads you to the question I was asking before: is it worth it? And it's not, art is not a question of occupying space. It's a mental space that you want to occupy. So it could be very easy to just have an idea and formulate it and say it, for example, like in conceptual art. But my area is also to build an object which has can be confronted to the real environment.
So you're talking about a sort of a puzzle, a mental puzzle and a physical puzzle. You say your works belong to a certain environment. So is this this question that you ask, is it worth it? Is it the first question that you asked Sylvie? What is the first question that you asked Sylvie?
What can we do?
And what did you answer?
We'll do it. The first question exactly was, what can we do to do better in the artwork and also in the studio, and it was really systemic. So in the Augures we never come with an answer. The most important is to start a discussion, to get everybody around the same table and have a discussion, a talk about how we do the thing. And there is it's the first the starting point. What's going on now, and how can we try to do this or this better? And is there something some points more easier than others? And that's what we try to do with Xavier Veilhan, is really to start from this point and try to make a plan to make the things little by little. It's not about changing everything at the same time. It's about just trying to do a progression in the work and in the daily life also of all the team. Because what was very interesting in this work with Xavier and his studio was that all the team was really concerned about what they were doing and how. And
how
many people in the team?
There is the base is 4 people plus myself, but we're eating together at the studio, and when we're eating we are 10.
Okay.
Because there is people like you met Dimitri, for example. They are independent.
Okay.
They are building the studio and they have their own. So the structure of the studio is also it's actually linked to the environmental things. Is very souple. It's very
agile.
Agile, and it can be adapted to many situations. And I think instead of having a heavy structure, because at some point we were like 12, 14 people here, and then the structure start to have less communication within the team because there is too many information passing by, and so
it's interesting because you talk about long term and short term. What will we change in the future, and what can change now? And that's interesting that we are at ChangeNOW to talk about this.
I think, excuse me to interrupt, but
yes,
I think because a link to the size of the team, for example, is also when I'm talking to my accountant, he's telling me I should develop and make more money. And my aim is not to make more money, but or to have a bigger team, for example. But my concern is to have access to things, and to be the smallest and to have the biggest access. And so it's not the same logic as a company that want to grow and send more money to the people putting money in the project. So it's different. It's a long-term project of bringing my work where I want to bring it, which is quite different. So, and it's linked to so it's a political, economical position that is linked to the consumption also, because if you are smaller, you have less consumption.
Very interesting. What is it to reach the ideal balance point between, like you say, the size of the team and your outreach? Very interesting. And Sylvie, you have been working with corporates and companies who generate a lot of waste. How is it different to work with this sort of agile team, and for an artist that does not generate that much waste compared to a corporate, but who maybe have more outreach and more influence?
Yeah, there is a very good point about influence, of course, because we know that the work of the artists is seen all over the world. So, of course, if they have an ecological interest, and it's of course a good sensibilization for everybody. And I think, as you said, Xavier, you have a small team and you want to stay small, and it's a kind of great agility for being able to have a look on everything and being able to talk directly with your suppliers, with the independents who work with you, and that's a good point, because there is a transparency which is very fundamental in the ecological transition of your work. So that's of course a bit easier, I mean, comparing to big companies, but the impact is not the same too. I mean, it's of course easier to change something in a small team than in a big company. So,
concretely, with your methodology, so you talked about all the assessment of what are you doing now, and what are the first steps that you can talk about of what you have already put in place or you want to put in place in the next coming years to inspire people who will be looking at this interview?
Well, it's if I may answer, we have a compost here, so we have a biological basket delivered at the studio. We change the electricity, l'abonnement électrique.
Company.
The company. So we follow your advice, I think, on that. And we swap the traditional car to an electric car. And we are working on a place to park the bicycles. We have bicycles. A lot of people are using bicycles. But what we want to develop is also within the artworks. For example, the model, which is the core of the mold, was made with polyurethane foam before, and now we swap to a more expensive solution, but doing the core with wood. But then we can use the wood as a model, as a sculpture. We are re-cleaning it, so it's also changing the habits in terms of processes, fabrication processes. But what we try to develop also together is to have benchmark and to be able to judge and to make a decision on whether we should fabricate a big piece, for example, on location or transport it. And it's very difficult to have, it's an equation with a lot of unknown within. And we work on having a solution on that. And it's very important to have not only average feeling, but to have numbers, figures on that.
So you talked about things that you do at the scale of the studio, things you do at the scale of your exhibitions. You also talked to me while we were visiting the studio that you also managed an exhibition from a distance. How does this happen? And my question behind this to the artist is to ask you, do you feel that those ecological constraints hinder or are deterrent to your creativity, and how do you work around these constraints?
I think it's a more philosophical issue that you have to feel in sympathy with your environment. And I'm interested in the idea, which is more metaphysical, of the environment, which is not only the river next to you or the forest next to you, but not only something that is within the atmosphere, which is called Gaia by Bruno Latour, for example. But for me, it's a whole universe, and we don't know the universe, and we are insignificant compared to the universe. When we know are in a situation that we can see every day that we alter the environment within the atmosphere. So there is on one scale a very strong impact that we have to reduce right now, and we are in an emergency, which I realized only like 3 years ago, I think, for myself. And I have to think about different issues, but for example, I was in Berlin when Chernobyl happened, and I was very shocked with the comparison of the information within Germany and with my friends from France, for example. So just to say, I think information is a key to those issues, and we have to develop not only it's a political statement. We have to put pressure on politics to change the relation to our environment.
Is this also something that Les Augures does, putting pressure and being an advocate for that transition?
We know that a lot of changes have to happen in the political and political world, of course, because all the people who organize and write the cahier des charges, they need to have some obligation, ecological. They need to put ecological obligation in the cahier des charges. I don't know in English, right? And if this happens, of course, all the cultural world and all the events and of the cultural world will change, of course. So that's a big point. And we also need the industry, because there is really a link between the industry and the research and development that they experience now with new materials and circular materials, that the art world can test and experiment in their artwork or scenography or everything that we do in the cultural world. So we need to also to think that the art world is really a good place to experiment new way of produce and in a small size, so it can be a good experimentation. Yeah.
What's the next project for you, Sylvie, and then we'll let Xavier conclude?
The next project, we have many in Les Augures, which is really nice. I can't just say one project, but I think the best thing that we are doing now and what we're gonna do is to really to federate the cultural world, to talk and have a discussion about everything. All the points that we can go through an ecological
transition. Can we mention a few of those players?
We are working for the City of Paris, the Cultural Ministry, and also incubators for cultural startups for impact for the cultural world.
Thank you so much. And you, Xavier?
Well, we are working on a few public art projects in different countries, and we're doing a piece for the Olympics, which might happen. It's a very interesting process because there is everything has turned very uncertain due to the sanitary crisis, but it's interesting to see how we can survive in this environment, which is a bit tricky. But as I like to say, it's a new situation and everything new is good. So as a good part, at least. So I don't want to say that this epidemic is a good thing, but we have good things to take out of this experience, I think. And then I'm working on a show in New York, happening beginning of November. And a new performance which is called Tout l'univers, which is on this cosmic feeling about approach of the environment.
Thank you very much to you too.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Welcome back, and make sure to check out their websites. So the website for Les Augures and Veilhan.fr to keep up with the next projects. Now we are welcoming Marine Tanguy. She's an agent. She's an entrepreneur. She's the founder of MTArt, the first artist agency in the world, and she has been loyal to ChangeNOW since the beginning, and thank you very much for that. And you're the inventor of the visual diet, which is a concept that personally I love, about the importance of art in personal life, but also the importance of art in public space. In this talk, so you are going to ask your guests about connection to nature, the voices of women, and also a polemic question: is there gender art, and is there a gender to creation? Very interesting topics. It's an interview that has been recorded a few days ago because Delphine Diallo, the photographer, lives in New York, and this morning it could have been too early. So we're gonna roll the clip, but before that, I would like to thank everyone, thank to all the participants to ChangeNOW, all the people who watched this video now or later. You have a few weeks to do so, and thank you for your confidence. If we manage to bring on board dozens of players, of major players in the art sector, it's thanks to you, to your confidence. So continue to follow ChangeNOW, and we have a beautiful story to write together. Thank you, and roll the clip. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ronan. And this is a topic I'm very, very passionate about. So it's a great honor to be doing it with Katy and Delphine today. So to kind of introduce the topic today, I wanted to speak about obviously something that anyone in the art world always speak about. It's the fact that the art world is not known for being very welcoming or accessible. And in fact, it's quite the opposite. It's been seen as quite hermetic and quite elitist, and therefore particularly unsuccessful at including and representing women, people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, but also non-white ethnicities. And so I think here what I want to bring forward is, of course, it's not only morally wrong, but I think also it's something that's harming the sector, because I don't think it's very economically viable. Alienating half of the world audience, I don't think it's a very clever choice in that context. And so I think it's kind of seeing and throwing a light and a spotlight today on people who've been working very hard to shift this reality. And I'm delighted that therefore we have two of the best examples of that today. Katy Hassell has been championing women artists on a daily basis since 2015. And she's a very smart brain behind the Great Women podcast and Instagram account. She's very much an incredibly successful curator, broadcaster, and art historian who is also based in London. And she's also recently joined the prestigious Forbes 30 under 30 list in culture and arts. And Delphine Diallo is a French Senegalese artist who is based in New York. She's using photography, collage, and storytelling to really shift the way we perceive women and women in color, and kind of giving them back a sense of agency. She definitely doesn't come from the traditional path in the art world, which is, if I may, is hopefully what give us a much fresher perspective today on the issues of the industry, but also the solution that she'll be bringing forward. No pressure, Delphine, therefore. So starting with Katy, you know, when I kind of researched what you did, I came across the fact that one of the key moments, and I hope this is correct, that had opened your eyes on the power of art was a module you had attended on ecological and activist art. And therefore, fast forward to a few years later, I feel this topic is, you know, something that I hear a lot more than in a few years back. And obviously the connection between gender and the climate is, I feel, even stronger than it was before. How do you feel this has evolved? How do you feel on that topic? And how did this happen how did that hit your brain that this was so relevant back then?
It's so interesting that you bring up this course, because it really, sort of, not to underestimate it, but it really was a total pivotal moment in my sort of art historical career. It was when I was in my final year at UCL studying history of art. And when I first experienced this course, I thought art history was about image making, history, expression, which of course it totally is. But then it took until this course for me to realize and see the bigger picture, not just in terms of, you know, the fact that art can be a sort of activistic thing, but also who gets to tell that story. And it was so kind of groundbreaking, and it made me just sort of totally open my eyes that art can be a force for change. And my ears really sort of started to prick up, and how you could discuss activism through art. And so, you know, you have people like, I don't know, Barbara Kruger and Jenny Holzer, who kind of took the sort of emblazing kind of text of advertising, that blaring advertising of the kind of 70s and 80s, and twisted it into art pieces that can really speak universally. You know, you see a Barbara Kruger, you know, your body is a battleground. That can speak to absolutely anyone, no matter what gender, no matter what race, no matter what culture, anything. It's the power that these artworks have to transcend time, culture, universe, and the fact that they were sort of made back then. And that really got me also thinking about how art can also be in the streets, which is, you know, so much of what you do as well. And I've seen Delphine's work off in the street, which is just wonderful at a time like this. And the fact that you can be just anyone passing through the street and see this, you know, slogan, you know, the Guerrilla Girls, who are one of my favorite collectives, they totally kind of, you know, broke down the art market and the art world and said, you know, these are the facts. Let's call this art, but this is also activism. You know, the personal is political. I personally am of the argument that all art should be political. And, you know, and then it kind of got me interested in this idea that the landscape, you know, the public landscape can be a sort of canvas for your art. And if you are an artist like Anna Mendieta, who was working in the 70s and 80s, and, you know, you want to explore migration and you want to explore, you know, the destructive notions of capitalist society and borders, and actually use, I think she called the earth her canvas, you know, it's the soil, because that place has no hierarchy. It has no sort of gender barriers. It's free for us to explore. So I think that is sort of inherently bound up in kind of changing the landscape of art, if that makes sense.
And I think the reason I'm so happy that you two are together is because generally every time I ever encounter any one of you, your energy is incredible. So like, I feel like I can take on the world, change it about 10 times, and I'm just like, whoa, this just happened. So I'm delighted that you guys are on the call for that. That's really interesting. My brain is really tempted to talk about art for art's sake, because to hear a British person so passionate to say that art is political is absolutely fascinating for me. But I will keep on track and ignore my distraction brain-wise, but really interesting. So I think in terms of continuing on this line of thought, and therefore thinking of the impact of the pandemic, there's been, I'm sure maybe you've seen this Guardian article that was discussing the impact that it specifically had on women, and the fact that they had to, both in terms of the loss of jobs, but also all the household tasks that they had to kind of put on top of this. And sadly, domestic violence, which is something that I've heard a lot through the French side in terms of the media as well. How do you think curators and art institutions, therefore, can respond to that, give a voice, and kind of make this the center of the conversation? And it's difficult not to speak about the recent Turner Prize in that context, so we'll try to ignore it now. But how do you feel this can be brought back in the center of the conversation? And I know that's a lot of your work. So what will be your hopes towards that?
I just think, when we finally get out of this lockdown, whatever it is, we are entering a completely different world, and an exciting world, a world where change needs to happen now. I mean, there's absolutely no question that we can live like we used to. And I think in terms of supporting artists who are maybe mothers, who are non-male, who, are often at a disadvantage. And I think that really, for me, speaks to the fact that art institutions need to stand up and actually say, you know what, we're going to give this residency to a mother, we're going to give this residency to a non-binary artist, we're going to give this residency to whoever, or this prize. It's interesting you brought up the Turner Prize, because personally, I love what they did last year, and the fact that 10 people awarded it. And to me, that is amazing, because it puts so many people who might otherwise be, maybe sidelined, right into the center. And, there are places like the National Gallery in London, which actually, in itself, looking at its collection has a lot of work to do, but they're getting there. But they have a residency that is exclusively dedicated to mothers. And that's actually such a huge thing, because when you are a woman, and we've seen this, especially in the last year, all these statistics that, we've reverted back to the 1960s or 50s or whatever, it's actually so important to spotlight those who don't often get a chance. And so I think those need to change, whether it's sort of scholarships at master's programs, whether it's residencies instigated by museums, whether it's, prizes, brand prizes to gallery prizes. It needs to change, but I think we're in a really exciting moment where I think a lot of people are thinking the same things.
I hope so. That's really where my hopes are. And I think kind of bringing back the topic in terms of the audiences in that context, do you feel therefore that they are, because you're kind of saying that they seem to be more aware, or at least there's a push towards this initiative. Do you think that therefore the recent years, people are more aware that they need to change? Do you think that this new audience, there's also new people that have come in that are therefore demanding that change? Or how are you positioned in terms of the audiences of the sector at the minute?
I've noticed since what I've been doing, I started my Instagram in 2015, and just in 6 years, the difference has been extraordinary. We've got people like, Thelma Golden in New York has totally trailblazed, but she's been doing that for decades. But in London, particularly where I'm from, we've had Frances Morris come and be head of Tate Modern, and she has honestly revolutionized the way we perceive blockbuster exhibitions. And she has put just the most extraordinary shows of women artists on who are actually not that big, in the sort of grand scheme of things. And she's really pushed that to the fore. And because, as me as well, I go to museums to learn. And actually, if I go to museums to learn that, the art history is full of white cis males, then I'm totally not only kind of missing out on great art, but I'm missing half the story. And so to have people who are so supposedly gatekeepers in these huge positions where they can actually individually catalyze change has been monumental. And then obviously we've got people like Zoe Whitley at the Chisenhale, and she's an extraordinary creator. She totally changed the landscape of American art for me when she curated Soul of a Nation here in London. Same with someone like Maria Balshaw at Tate. These women at the top are game changing. I mean, especially I've noticed in the British art scene at large.
Yeah, that very, very inspiring. Delphine, moving on to you with absolutely no pressure. And then you can have a drink of water, Katy. Delphine, I'm really interested because, and actually that's something that you have in common with Katy, because you've used different ways from different sectors to bring that back into the art sectors and how you first started out. I remember, Katy, you said you were inspired by the fashion side and how they were building audiences. And I think what's really nice is, Delphine, obviously you started in the music sector, which has much larger audiences and therefore different challenges, but completely different in terms of audiences to the art. So can you tell us a little bit between the music industry and the art world, what's the main, difference that you saw in terms of access? Do you, was one more restricted than another, or is there something that therefore you've been able to bring from the music world to the art world, or you felt they could learn from each other?
Yeah, I mean, what we're facing right now in this year of transformation and transcending our conditioning is the fact that there is already model, then we can be inspired to be able to just see what they've been achieving. So through history, art for me has been very monochrome and very male gaze, or even we talk about the quality of the work, right? We talk about old painting, we talk about color, we talk about the art of the masters, right? So the masters are men, right? So there is all this process that we need to understand when it comes to the art world, which is based on the male gaze. And as much as we love art history and we love those paintings, right? We have to question our 21st century story, the story of art, which is not going to be better than Da Vinci, but there is something that we're going to reach in another dimension, and the transcendence of, let's say, Mona Lisa, which was it's a transcending piece, right? That everybody kind of recognizes, even in the art world itself. That's gonna help us to achieve another state in the 21st century of transcendental art. And I don't want people to make a mistake of like psychedelic art or spiritual art, or like, no, this is an integration of what's been hid for so many centuries. So when it comes to music achieve it, because the music industry is 50% of the music industry is representing Black women artists, and Black women artists, musicians are very successful. I don't have to only mention Alicia Keys or Jill Scott or other one. Like, they have such a successful career and such a number of Black women that they could jump to do movies. That's how successful they were, you know what I mean? Instead of like focusing only on their career of being able to achieve something, they just stopped to like branding themselves with brand now, like makeup or whatever, the fashion. Like, this is an integration. It doesn't mean that some people say, well, this is too commercial. It's like, it doesn't, you say this is too commercial, but there is so many ways now to be able to inspire people that the music industry, even for me, if it's too pop, right? This is the pop music, but there is so many layers of the music, world. I wake up in the morning and sometimes I only want to listen Indian music or rag or African music, or I would never be able to do that like 20 years ago as a teenage and have access to so many different music. And I think art can achieve this level of passion in the worldview. And it's not, for me, it's still not a worldview. And I wish it could be a worldview, because another example, like Google becoming the knowledge of everyone. If you Google female art, history, you have a range of women. They're very much white or actually Mexican. And the only Black women and you see on Google are Kara Walker and Toyin, which is a friend of mine, Toyin Odutula, we start together. And Toyin is there. I was very happy to see her on Google. But again, like the range of diversity that we have in in the art world really tells you what it all say to women. And guerrilla movement and all that is like, it can't just be one movement. It has to be thousands of women artists who are coming in the 21st century with new story. I'm just one drop of water. I know my purpose.
Really interesting, because Katy brought forward quite a few curators who have been change makers, and I think you're bringing forward the idea here of the platform, the tools, because I think the shift of my understanding from the music sector is very much when the record label stopped controlling everything and it went over to platforms like Spotify or, you know, Apple or iTunes, that suddenly meant that you could start your day with a much diverse access in terms of the music, and there was a lot less control on what you would listen on the radio. So it's interesting on listening to you, and that's something that we'll keep for later on because I strongly believe in the role of both. So I would just love to hear your thoughts on that. You've been definitely a incredibly inspiring energy in terms of throughout COVID. And you, as you know, because you're a very strong believer in being a polymath, and you've mentioned that this could be a new renaissance of art or people making art post-COVID, and therefore you felt really boosted creatively. Can you expand on this and also expand, obviously, because I don't want to just do something very pinky and rosy, but the challenges that will come with that as well?
So my study in this area was, I can't move, I can't travel, which I'm a traveler, I'm a mover, I love to discover people, but suddenly I had to stay still and find the space within me. So what I did, I discovered an amazing African art collector, an American man who had an African art collection in Manhattan, 3,000 to 4,000 pieces in middle of July, who invited me after I published this picture of the New York Times, where I built a woman armor, 2019. And this woman armor picture was released in the pandemic time. And this, and this picture was on fire, like burning fire. So the fire of the feminine, the fire of this, the inner discovery of the female energy is actually coming now to all of us, and you can't stop us. It's like a fluid. It's a dynamic. I call that the dynamo. I was like, I'm not on my own feeling it this way. I know it. That's why I have so much excitement. It's like when I listened to Katy, I was like, wow, she looks different than me, but I can see the heart is the same. You see? So my understanding here, it's like you do your work. There is an individual work to do, which I do my work, right? But there is a collective and inclusive work to do with other women. And I feel like we need to find a place where we're not more in competition, but we actually accepting our issue from the past, and we're moving forward to a dimension where we're gonna do business, we're gonna inspire people, and we're gonna, each one of us have a purpose. And that's why I felt about this pandemic. It really reached my level of understanding of others and acceptance and compassion and forgiveness, where I'm not, I'm not left and right, or I'm not dark or light. I'm like neutral. And in this neutrality, I can observe everybody gift.
Again, I'm asking very broad questions, but I'm glad that they're at least a little bit challenging, because I know we can't answer all of them in just a small talk. But is there, let's talk, because you brought it a lot forward, Delphine, of what you call the male gaze, and therefore what do you call the gendered language of painting or photographing, of looking? Like, from an art historical perspective, Katy, you would have kind of almost gone through the toolkit and the structuring. So how do you define it, and how do you see it evolving? And same, Delphine, because you mentioned a lot the male gaze, so which means that for you art history is very gendered so far and towards one type of gender. How do you deconstruct it or construct it?
It's such an interesting one, and people ask me the whole time. I don't think there is a sort of distinct, this is, first of all, there are lots of genders in the world. So it's like, I don't see that there are sort of specific categories. But I think Delphine, you spoke so articulately and eloquently there. It's about the people who kind of put those categories on us. And it's about that if you are someone who is not you know, usually a white cis male, then you have been oppressed in some way by the art world, you know, like everyone has. And so because of that, maybe you could look at someone's work being slightly different, you know, like I was saying earlier, you know, Anna Mendieta used the soil as her canvas because, you know, that was something that was void of patriarchal barriers. And, you know, there are so many kind of amazing works in history like that. Or you look at someone like Cindy Sherman, who has, you know, completely sort of turned in terms of the male gaze kind of onto her and totally interrogated it. And that was absolutely amazing. But then, I mean, what's so interesting is kind of thinking about art now. And, you know, one of my favorite artists is someone like Julie Meritou, and who has had an extraordinary life. And she, you know, I don't necessarily, you would even say that, oh, it's a sort of female sort of point of view. I mean, it's just, I mean, there are so many point of views in her work, but I don't necessarily agree that there is sort of a gendered, I mean, I'm also not an artist, so it's not like I kind of, I mean, I definitely see the world through a particularly female lens, but it's interesting to kind of think about now how those sort of binaries in society should be inflicted on society, on artists.
Yeah. Delphine?
Yeah, so I love Katy when she's saying, and I think this is what is most of the perception is this way, right? But when we come to, when I'm talking about the female and the male, I don't talk about gender. So it's not gender. A man can actually have a female gaze. It doesn't have to be homosexual. So there's nothing to do with sexuality and gender. Female and male, every one of us has it inside of herself. I have a masculine energy because I need to get stuff done. It's like masculine. And I have the female energy. I like to look good. I like to feel the sensuality. I like to, you know, there's so many organic field in me, like the flow of water and everything. And this field of energy is feminine, is like integrating the whole, right? And the male gaze, it's square, right? Everything is square. I mean, you can go out on the streets, you know, it's a good training. You go on the street and you take a look around you, where are the curve? So let's say one of your mind is curvy and the other one it's square. So the society is only for processing things in a square level. So I agree with Katy when she said this is not about this and this. She's right. But to be able to make people understand, and this is not about gender.
Both of you use Instagram and digital platforms. You have both a very strong community, and therefore, you know, the way, I mean, Delphine, you're like a major advocate to so many artists and creative. I've always seen you as someone that's constantly chatting through the digital channels and kind of building friendships and encouragements. And Katy, you've built an amazing supportive community as well around your work and around women being better positioned in the sector. So how do you think this platform has changed the game? I think the three of us are probably the new generation who has been propulsed thanks to some of these platforms initially and been given a larger voice and a faster voice, I think, in a sector that was not giving a voice very easily. So how has it changed? How have you been able to therefore tell your story differently using that platform? Do you feel you've been able to have your own story better? Like, tell me a bit more about that.
Shall I start? And I mean, for me, it's Instagram. It's democracy. You know, it's totally. I mean, I don't know what happens at the top, but in terms of the user, you know, you can put whatever you want out there. And I mean, my community, I mean, started from absolutely zero. You know, there wasn't one day where I woke up and there were 100,000 followers. It's been slowly over time, and it's about like. What's so amazing about it is the fact that like it's the internet also at large, and that you can literally put anything out there. And what's amazing, and probably the reason why, you know, my Instagram has grown to like in the hundreds of thousands, is because people are hungry for these stories. You know, we have honestly just missed out a history in the world. I mean, honestly, I mean, I'm also still learning every single day, and will do for the rest of my life, to try and understand somehow this whole universe in the planet called Earth. You know, what what has happened and what will happen and what are the stories we should be telling. And I think it has allowed people who don't necessarily have PhDs, institutional support, all these things, they can make their own voice. And as a result, our world is becoming so equal. We're hearing so many more powerful voices that would have been suppressed by institutions before. And I think it's so game changing. I think this is the biggest moment of our time, in the sense that it is democratic to be able to create an account and champion who you want. And as a result, people are listening.
Yeah, I mean, I 100% agree with her. I've been supported by, Instagram from the beginning. I start with zero. I start to post my work, but not only my work. I start to post feelings, experience, a more organic way to just share the work than just posting picture. And I thought I had a really deep thought before I started even to do on Instagram, and say, well, because I understand perception, I'm going to give people an inspiration outlet. So each time that I'm posting, I'm doing out of my desire to say, oh, I want to be well known. It was kind of like, it was fun at the beginning. You have to start this as a fun, and then Instagram find me, promote me. This is where, the level of numbers like grow up, because Instagram wanted to promote female artists. So not just them, but different brands came to me and want to support my journey. And that's why I felt Instagram is without the social media and without the access to this, I could have the same work today and having a website. I would not have the opportunities that it comes to me each time by Instagram. And some people today doesn't believe me. They say, how did you get all this work for so many years? Like, all those magazines hire you, all those brands hire you. It's like, it's all on Instagram. Like, it means like they had to check my Instagram. They saw the number, they saw the inspiration, and then they say, okay, she's not just professional as a photographer. She has a follower, but she can inspire people. So there is two different ways now that people want to hire you. They don't want to hire you only because you're a photographer. And I felt like photography can be limited for me. So it's a tool for me, right? It's a tool. But the social media, expanding that tool, the numbers of people that I follow are very low. And I'm not faithful on Instagram. I curating my following. So I can actually, I can really talk to them. I know by the study that I did in digital world, it's like you can go over 150 people that you follow. After 150, you can follow up with the other one. So what I do, it's like I make sure that when I connect, which is 2 or 3 hours a day, it's a very curated with a different field that I want to reach, which for me recently is science. And I want to be able to have a discussion with scientists. So I'm entering the field of science and I'm connecting with those people, Robert Grant, who just published this book about science and art called Philomath, see, instead of like polymath. But that's the same. And then we need to, like, if social media can create this integration between art, science, and music, we finally gonna go back to where we've been before so the modern world took this away from us, which is music, science, art, philosophy, psychology. They're all connected and we lost track of them together. So that's how I use Instagram, right? And then I use it very in a good way because I understand what it does good and what it does not good, but people have no studying the effect on social media. So what happened right now, they're only 12 years old playing with the tool, you know?
Being told off by Ronan, which is it's a very regular situation. He's very right that we're running out of time. I mean, obviously I have a friendship with you two and I have a lot of respect and admiration for you two. So I would want people to continue to follow you and see the work that you're doing, because I kept on hearing bits from what you were saying that could be expanded so at lens. Katy, what's the next thing that we should follow from your side? Because you've been pretty busy recently. So what's the thing that people can follow and should follow?
In terms of my work or other people's?
Your work.
Oh. Well, my work does encompass other people's work completely.
Katy,
So,
it's all about you. Katy, it's all about you.
Spotlight.
I've built a career on championing women. It's perfect. So you can find me on Instagram at the Great Woman Artist, and also I also run a podcast called the Great Woman Artist Podcast, which I think is up to about 65 episodes now, and it just has the most incredible in-depth speakers who are all from all walks of life, from artists to curators to authors to anyone, and so that's where you can find me.
And Delphine?
Well, I can't travel still, so I'm in New York. I might just go back. I might just go. The immigration doesn't open the door to us in Europe right now, so I think my story is gonna expand here, and I'm probably gonna document it what's happening in New York, which is pretty amazing, of rebirth here for the summer. But also have a book is gonna be coming soon. My first like art book, well done, with maybe Italian or Belgium printer, art print, very nice. And I'm very excited with the book, because this is how I want to keep the legacy. I'm obsessed with books. So it's a really good object outside of whatever we experiencing on social media. So it's a balance of both space, object, coffee table. And this is where I think people can find me when they're going to find the book,
Great. Well, you have this in common with Katy as well. Thank you so much, ladies, for your time. And I hope everyone leaves as inspired as I am. And I hope you all enjoy the rest of ChangeNOW as well.
Thank you so much, Marine, and ChangeNOW. Thank you.
Thank you, Katy. Thank you, Marion. You're the best.
Thank you both.
Ciao, ciao.